All right, welcome back to Brussels Street Replay. Another week closer to football, and the big news this week, Ravens training camp has opened. The rookies have reported, um, but the big news this week, I feel like, is the Orlando Brown contract mess over in Kansas City. And joining me today, as always, is Ronald Tooth and our good friend Mike Natelli, and we're going to break down the latest Ravens news, the rookie storylines at training camp, and the biggest positional battles to watch. And then we're going to do the defensive side of the ball in our 7-on-7 draft that we did a couple weeks ago and round that part out just in time for us to head into the season. Mike, Ron, how we doing?
Doing well, man. Another week closer to the season here. It's pretty much full speed ahead from this point on.
Yeah, it's good to be here, guys, as always. And I don't think I've been on since we lost a couple great Ravens, so I will briefly pay my respects to both Jalen Ferguson and Tony Siragusa. Got a lot of sports memorabilia in this office over here, and a lot of that's thanks actually to Siragusa's great mid-2000s show Man Caves, and so owe him a great deal of gratitude for that. But yeah, two great Ravens, and I don't want to bring the show down too much. Sad note, but wanted to just real quickly acknowledge two great Ravens we lost. So may they both rest in peace.
Appreciate that as always, Mike. I know Ron and I've talked about it. Just excited, not excited. I guess I shouldn't say excited, but I'm curious to see what they do to honor those guys during the season. And I think a certain part of it being a part of whatever celebration of life they do for those guys. I think I will be excited to at least be a part of that. So it'll be another good chance for our fan base to kind of band together. Moving into kind of more contemporary news, like I said at the top of the show, Orlando Brown, not a lot of Ravens news. We went over the Houston signing on our last podcast, and I think the closest thing to Ravens news we have right now is this Orlando Brown Chiefs drama. I mean, it seems like they came in with an offer that was pretty squarely in top 5 left tackle money. I think if I'm correct, it might even be the biggest left tackle contract, but it's not necessarily market resetting in the way that I think he had imagined for himself when he engineered that trade to KC. But I mean, I don't think he's played up to wanting a resetting the market at one of the most expensive positions in the league. I don't think he played that well last year, well enough in one season to say, the Chiefs to reset the market for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he didn't. It's not just your opinion. He objectively did not. PFF had him ranked as the 23rd ranked tackle in the season. He was really good in the run game. Struggled in the past. The wheels really fell off in the playoffs. I mean, that was a big part of why Kansas City ultimately ended up getting upended by Cincinnati in that game. And it's just, it kind of blows my mind while at the same time being a relief. Because if we were dealing with this drama right now, on top of everything that we are already dealing with Lamar, I don't know how any of us would be able to handle it.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I think it's a good example of the Ravens being ahead of the ball and kind of knowing how players are feeling, sensing how players are going to approach their contract negotiations. And I mean, Brown has the Chiefs over a barrel and he knows it. And this is kind of, something the Ravens try to avoid doing.
Like, do you think he has them over, like, to the extent where they're going to give in and just say, oh, whatever, just give him what he wants? Because I don't think so.
I mean, I'm hope. So what I think they should do is be like, you don't want to sign a deal? Fine. You're going to play on the tag for a year. But you're going to have to play in order to earn that tag money, obviously. And if you want to sit out for a year and not make any money, that's up to you. I do think the Chiefs are smarter than most of the teams in the NFL, but they did not have a deal ready when they traded for him. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think if you give up a first-round pick, you need to have a deal ready. That's an automatic thing for me. And I think that is the mistake, and I think that's why Brown knows he's got a little bit more leverage.
Yeah, well, there was that quote that came out the other day, and it was an anonymous Chiefs source, so, take everything with a grain of salt. But it essentially said that this Orlando Brown isn't the guy that they traded for. So, I mean, for all we know, maybe even if they didn't have a specific, like, figure in place already, they at least had, like, a ballpark, and he could have just totally switched it up and said, hey, no, I want more in guaranteed money, because it ultimately does seem like the guarantees is what it's kind of coming down to.
Yeah, and I think the other thing for me is you look at how things played out with him in Baltimore, and, I totally understand wanting to play left tackle because of your dad. I totally get that. But demanding a trade instead of playing right tackle for a year and then hitting the market, is it is a move. And again, I don't have an issue with players doing what's best for them, but the Chiefs have to recognize this is a player who is willing to do those kinds of things. And so I think, this is the first time I think in recent history, I feel like they've really mismanaged something. I feel like what they did with the Tyreek Hill trade, for better or for worse, in terms of the Tyreek Hill talent, I feel like they handled it the right way. Whereas this one, you got to question not having a deal ready to go. And the Ravens on the other end are looking great after this deal as you go after the gallon of water. The Ravens
Gotta
look
hydrate,
great.
brother. It's 100 degrees every single day here in Connecticut right now. I'm ready to die.
Yeah, what did they gave up Brown and a second for a first and a fifth. A solid deal in terms of value at the time, and it looks even better now looking at the trouble the Chiefs are having. And we've just got Odafe Owe locked down for the next 4 years. I mean, it feels really good, and I think it's a strategy. Like, right, one is what this happening once is just a thing. You do it. Now with Hollywood again, it's a strategy. The Ravens are betting on themselves. They're betting on their scouts and their coaches to identify and develop talent and get the most out of all these players on rookie contracts. That's the strategy. That's what they're committed to doing. And, I think you see that very much in this year's draft class when you see how many players are expected to have an early impact, not just the first rounders, but Travis Jones, Isaiah Likely, they're going to be impact players pretty early on, or the Ravens at least, envision them that way. And they're betting on these rookies. And the rookies reported for camp yesterday. We had one guy, I think Devin Williams, who was one of the receivers who I guess looked kind of good at camp, not report. So I'm kind of curious to hear what happens with that. And that's obviously one of the main rookie storylines is these undrafted receivers and who's going to emerge as a pass catcher for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. You mentioned Williams, and there was another guy today. I'm going to go to Jeff Strebik's Twitter right now just so I don't mess it up. It was Ricky Person. I guess he's a running back from NC State. He just decided he didn't want to play football anymore. Glenn coffeed us.
There you go. And I do really not like seeing. I'm looking at this now. I really don't like seeing Benjamin Victor on the non-football injury list because he was one of those undrafted receivers that you hope. I know Ohio State guy over there, Ron. One of those guys that you hope, he's been on the practice squad the last couple of years. Maybe he could break out a little bit. Obviously, we have no idea what the extent of the injury is, but still not great to see.
Yeah, no, it's not great to see. Michael, you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you never want a guy to be hurt. Going back to last year, Ron, I know you know in particular my love for Benjamin Victor and how much I was hoping he would emerge as one of the guys on the depth chart, just as someone who has fixated on adding taller receivers around Lamar Jackson for the last 2 seasons. So obviously that's not everything. And he was never really in line to see significant snaps, even if he makes his team one way or the other. So not a huge loss, but you never want to see guys get hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's probably at the top of the list of those, non-drafted wide receivers alongside Jalen Moore. I feel like at the top of most people's list is the ones who could, be that fifth wide receiver and potentially make an impact. And yeah, like you said, he's a big guy. He's a contested catch guy, and that's not something we have a ton of right now. As for the other rookies, it's an interesting class, not just, the guys we drafted, but all the undrafted guys. One of them you imagine is going to emerge as another undrafted gem. And this is another really clever thing the Ravens do. They promote undrafted players on their team a lot. They have a lot on their practice squad, and pretty much one every year makes the 53-man roster. You know what that does? Every year when a player doesn't get drafted and they're like, all right, I want the best shot at making a roster, they look to Baltimore. And that's why every year it's self-sustaining. You get the best crop of undrafted rookies. It's such a smart thing to do. Another way the Ravens kind of take advantage of, the systems of the league, the way things work to really benefit themselves. I feel like, the undrafted rookies at inside linebacker are really intriguing. We've mentioned the wide receivers. I guess there's a handful of others, but it's mainly those two positions that they targeted this year. Which of those groups are you more excited to see? The undrafted receivers or the undrafted linebackers?
Well, for me personally, it's definitely the linebackers, just because there's a much greater chance of whoever does make the team from that crop getting substantial playing time. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want our guy Shamar Bridges to make the team, but at the same time, outside of Bynes, and he's another year older. I mean, he was good last year, so I'm not going to, put the kibosh on him. Who knows? He could come in and be productive again, but it's him and Queen. And then it's a lot of question marks. Like we mentioned last week, it's Harrison, it's Christian Welch. But then you start to get into the Diego Fagos of the world and those kind of guys. And it's really interesting because it feels like, what's the Zacoby McClain? Did I get that?
Auburn.
He's another one. So they've got some guys there who aren't just fighting for a spot on the roster, but potentially some real playing time baked into it as well.
Mike, but what about you? Who are some rookies that you're excited to watch at camp this year? Excited to see what they do?
Yeah, you inevitably have to bring up Josh Ross, the undrafted one out of Michigan, just staying with his positions coach, or staying with the defensive coordinator, rather, who's now going to be just carrying over with him in Baltimore. You got to think he has an inherent leg up on the rest of the competition, just knowing a lot of the familiarity with Mike Macdonald. Macdonald also likewise having a lot of familiarity with him as a player, knowing his strengths, his weaknesses, and how those might fit in with what the Ravens are trying to do on defense. McClain's one that I obviously have not been at camp, but just at the mini camp, but just the reviews that are coming out about McClain. I'm certainly not saying he's going to be the next Ray Lewis, but you read everything about him, and it's very kind of Lewis-esque in the sense of like undersized, but man, does he get after it. He does everything you want him to do. It's just a size thing. And so there's a lot of excitement there as well. As far as, rookies that are lower on the depth chart as well. Not an undrafted guy, but as a Missouri guy, I'm really excited to see Tyler Beatty and what he can do in this offense. Obviously not going to be very high on the depth chart if everyone's healthy, but in a running back room where regardless of what J.K. Dobbins says, whether he's healthy or not, even if he's healthy, he's going to get probably a limited workload early on. Same with Gus Edwards. So going to be plenty of carries to go around for Beatty and Mike Davis as well, you have to think.
Yeah, really quick, Nikhil, not to stop you, just to touch on that. I was actually having a conversation yesterday about this with all the J.K. Dobbins and Ian Rappaport stuff going on.
The beef.
Beef, heavy. But despite what J.K. says, and I'm sure he will be ready for week one, ultimately it comes down to John Harbaugh on the coaching staff, how much he plays. Even if he feels like he's ready and, coach, give me 20 carries, John Harbaugh historically has never done that when it comes to injured players, and there's no chance he's going to do it with a guy who could be a superstar running back like J.K. Dobbins. I would be shocked, me personally, and I might get, flack for this or whatever. I don't think he's going to get 15 carries in a game till halfway through the season. I think we just have way too much depth there. I do think Tyler Beatty is going to get a lot of carries, snaps, something, he's going to get a lot of snaps. How many carries he gets between him and Mike Davis, especially early, obviously Gus coming back too. But I think Batty's another one, even though he wasn't undrafted, a candidate for at least the first half of the year to really make some noise and earn himself some more important carries later in the season as the playoffs start to creep up.
Yeah, I ever since Mike has talked about Betty a lot more after the draft, I've gotten more and more excited about him. But we talk. I feel like sometimes we do get caught up talking about the lower drafted guys, the undrafted guys, and we're like, yeah, we had 2 first-round picks this year. We had Kyle Hamilton, who is, by all accounts, at least the best pure football player to me in the draft. He may not be the best at any one position. He's clearly the best safety. But, in terms of just football player, I mean, what a guy. And Linderbaum, I'm excited to see what Hamilton does. I'm curious to see how Linderbaum fits in this offense, what this offense looks like. Are they going to switch to some more zone concepts because they have his skills on the line now, along with Stanley? Really intrigued about that. And then he's going to match up with Travis Jones a lot, the 2 rookies. And Jones is exactly the kind of guy that we worry about Linderbaum with. Does he have the strength to hang with those guys in pass protection in a phone booth? Can he move them off the ball in a power run game? Is that something that he's going to be able to do in the pros? And I think Jones is going to be, obviously not a elite defensive tackle or anything, but in terms of a rookie on rookie matchup, it's going to be really interesting to watch. Yeah,
for sure. Who knows? He can maybe even get some reps in there with Michael Pierce when he's in too. There's going to be no shortage of big bodies for Tyler Linderbaum to get accustomed to the NFL with here in training camp.
And I think that we're really going to see what the Ravens saw in him in camp. He just strikes me as that kind of guy. He's an Iowa guy. The average Iowa guy isn't just going to get a good review from Marshall Yanda. And Yanda has raved about Linderbaum to the Ravens. And so that's a real vote of confidence for me. That's important for me to hear. If I didn't hear that, I would be worried, right? If I didn't hear that Yanda was a big fan, I would be like, there's no way Yanda isn't in on this at all. Doesn't know the guy, isn't, informed with in with the program still. So it was good to hear that he liked him. And then I think, the other two rookies, I'm really curious to see how they look early on in camp, because I don't think we're going to see too much of them early in the season, are the cornerbacks, Demarion Williams and why am I blanking? Jalen Armour-Davis. They're going to be the two cornerbacks. I think it's fairly clear that Humphrey Peters and Kyle Fuller are probably going to be cornerbacks 1, 2, and 3. But after that, it's not clear. I mean, I think Brandon Stevens is kind of in that mix, but he's going to play a hybrid safety role too. I think, he'll be in the slot a lot. Cornerback 4, I think, is going to be Jalen Armour-Davis, Brandon Stevens, Demarion Williams. I'm curious to see how that competition plays out.
Yeah, and also don't sleep on those tight ends. Well, the one thing I think is most exciting entering this year offensively, despite the perceived shortcomings at wide receiver, is that while it's very easy and at times very warranted to criticize Greg Roman and his play calling and all those things, we also have to remember that this guy was at his best having Lamar Jackson playing like an MVP, a unanimous MVP quarterback when he had tight ends. Last year, obviously he had Mark Andrews, who set the world on fire. But with Nick Boyle hurt for pretty much the entire season, and then, a former third-round pick who had injuries and hadn't really played before, and Josh Oliver and Eric Tomlinson, there was not a lot of tight end depth beyond Mark Andrews last year. And so now you add Isaiah Likely, now you add Charlie Kolar, Nick Boyle potentially back healthy. It's really exciting to think about what this offense could look like with Greg Roman. He is a guy who you kind of need to give the right pieces to. He is a very one-dimensional offensive coordinator, and he needs a very specific set of things. And so now they've given him that again, and it'll be interesting to see if now that he finally has that again, he can either sink or swim.
I feel like SWAT's about to break down my door for how many times we've said Greg Roman here. Like Kadri Ismail, I'll be like,
Quadri Ismail's ears just started ringing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, that shortage at wide receiver, sure, but, overcome that with tight ends, and especially, Likely and Kolar, not necessarily great blockers, but this coaching staff has done a good job of training up the run blockers in the tight ends and even the wide receivers. And so, that's not something I'm super worried about. I'm just excited to see what they do. So yeah, super strong rookie draft class. I think we're just really excited to see what they do. Moving on to kind of like some of the positional battles. I think the one that intrigues me the most are the two, and they're on the offensive line, because I think that is really the key at this point. That is the last remaining thing that has to get perfectly ironed out for this offense to be firing on all cylinders. Left guard and right tackle. Those are the two that seem to be up for grabs, with Stanley, Linderbaum, and Zeitler, kind of locked in at their three positions. But the question is, who's going to start at left guard and who's going to start at right tackle? Ron, who you got at those positions?
Well, this becomes even more interesting when you enter in the fact that we don't even know if Ronnie Stanley is going to be ready for week 1. I mean, we hope so, but if he's not ready, then not only are we looking for who's going to be our starting right tackle, but who's going to be filling in, whoever it was going to start at right tackle is probably going to be the one filling in for left tackle. So then it opens up just all these different kinds of competitions. It's crazy. So I guess if I had to pick right now, I would probably say Tyree Phillips for left guard, unless Ben Cleveland comes in and shows us a big improvement for last year. I mean, Cleveland was good in spurts last year, but overall, I mean, that draft night hype and, hearing about how he was John Harbaugh's favorite player in the draft and all this stuff, in year 1, he didn't really live up to that stance. He was also injured a lot, which could have played a big part in it, but you can't really consider him the front runner for the race right now. So it would be Phillips for me. And at the right tackle spot, again, going back to what I said before, just I guess assuming that Ronnie Stanley will be healthy week 1, I'm going to say Morgan Moses as the starting right tackle. I mean, they went out of their way to sign him this year. It was obviously a position they wanted to address pretty early in free agency, and they did it. So he would be my pick, with Falele kind of being under his wing, learning as a mentor. And even Juwan James, who knows what he's going to do this year. He's kind of the wild card in all this, isn't he? So I guess I'll go Moses and Tyree Phillips. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if any of the names that I just mentioned were in there.
So I think I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum of you. I'm pretty much already ready to pencil in Phillips and Moses regardless. I just, like you said about signing Moses, I think that Moses and James are probably when they were at their best, in 2018 or whatever, when they last played at the same time, probably about the same. I'm not sure James was, that much better. I mean, some people seem to be really excited about James, but then I think, a couple years away from football, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much, he's going to be able to just slide right back in and do a really great job compared to Moses, who's just been grinding as a really good offensive tackle last few years. He doesn't let you down. He doesn't get hurt. He's consistent, knock on wood. And so I think he's going to start there. And I think this team wants Tyree Phillips at left guard. They've tried to start him there for the last 2
We don't want him at right tackle, I'll tell you that much.
Hell no. But they've tried to start him at left guard for the last 2 seasons, or I guess right guard in 2020 and left guard last year. And, I think it's going to take a big push physically and metaphorically from Ben Cleveland to dislodge him, because I think Ben Powers in the 7th is going to go to, like, I don't know, Philly for, like, or not, maybe not Philly, maybe not a good example, but, like, I don't know.
I hear you. He doesn't seem like a guy who's long for this team.
Yeah, Ben Powers in the 7th for, like, Washington's 5th or something like that. Like, that's
we have him already.
Right. And, other than that, I think for me the X factor is Makari. Do they want Makari as a true floating 6th O lineman? Obviously, this depends on Stanley's status too. But do they want Makari as a true floating 6th O lineman, or do they want to, give someone who is probably their 5th best offensive lineman? I would get maybe even their 4th best offensive lineman. Get him on the line, right? It's Stanley, Zeitler, Linderbaum. I'm not sure if Phillips or Moses is
from there. You could start making arguments,
right? And is Makari going to compete for the left guard spot? Is he going to compete for the right tackle spot? I said a lot of times last year that if Makari is our right tackle this year, I can live with that. He played his ass off last year, and so I'm very, very intrigued to see what he does in camp. Maybe more than almost any other player. I think just he is just such a raven, and I'm curious to see what their plans for him are. Mike, how are you feeling about the O-line?
Yeah, I mean, you got to think the thing with Ja'Wuan James is that in a vacuum, in a purely hypothetical sense, he has the highest ceiling of anyone contending for that day, at least as of week 1, right? Bailele obviously has the highest ceiling of anyone in that group, but he doesn't look like he's likely to start week 1. So of the contenders for the week 1 job, you have to think that he has the highest potential ceiling of any of them. And if he is healthy and if he is playing at that ceiling, it kind of takes care of itself, and he'll be in there. And Moses and McCary will both be able to either be swing guys, or McCary can come in left guard if they want him to. But if he's not that, then you have to think that Moses is going to be that right tackle. And then to your point, Nikhil, do they want McCary being more of a pure swing guy, or would they rather, if needed, pull him into that swing role and have Phillips come in there, or have him kind of entrenched as that left guard solidly, since you also have Moses? There's a lot of flexibility on this offensive line now for the first time in a while, now that you have both Moses, who can handle both sides tackle-wise, you have McCary, who can go all over the place. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about it, it's probably going to be Phillips and Moses with McCary in that swing role, if you ask me for where I'm putting my money on it.
And then, Ron, you talked a little bit about inside linebacker, the kind of inside linebacker 2 spot earlier. And yeah, I mean, I think that is the one that's toughest to predict, because age regression is so hard to predict. It's so hard to say, when the drop off is going to be a little bit to a lot. And I think, Bynes is at that age, but he's still so cerebral and so smart, and has the reaction speed and short area quickness to get the job done. He's not flowing into the backfield or chasing down sweeps quite as much as, Patrick Queen is going to, but he is still a damn solid player. The question is, can Malik Harrison recapture some of that Ohio State form? Because I still think Malik Harrison has the skills to be a good second inside linebacker. He's just had a tough go of it. I mean, his first few years didn't really get much playing time. Last year, he got shot. Like, that's tough to contend with. That's tough to deal with. And so I think he'll have a good shot. But Mike, like you said, Josh Ross, I mean, that is the inside track that I don't think it's tough to beat, especially if he shows up on special teams. It's going to be hard for the Ravens to not keep him on the roster.
Yeah, for sure. And this is also kind of the position where, I mean, I know everyone's expecting them to go out and add a veteran receiver before the season starts. I think the position that you should be watching, for camp cuts and things like that, is middle linebacker. I think once we get into camp a little bit and we see, I mean, obviously we know at the top it's going to be Bynes and Queen, short of something unexpected, knock on wood. But after that, it just seems it's more about like, all right, let's get as many guys there and undrafted as we can. Let's just bring in a bunch of bodies and kind of throw them all at the wall and see who sticks. And if none of them stick, which I think there's a greater chance of those guys not sticking than the end of the roster receivers not sticking, I think that's a place they're ultimately going to go out and look to add somebody, whether it's via trade or whether it's picking up somebody off the waiver wire that somebody else lets go. But as it stands right now, it's going to be, I think it's going to be Queen and Bynes at the top. And I mean, I'm interested to see, Ross and Fago both. And I mean, Zakoby McClain, like we mentioned before, everything that we've heard about him so far has been nothing but stellar. So who knows? Maybe they've got two guys and, two kind of diamonds in the rough with these undrafted guys. But, it's just going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, there's just so many different directions you could go with this. And the other thing is they have lots of different options. As the roster stands today, I would think that it's probably going to be more of like a 2A and 2B situation just because of Josh Bynes' snap count, where even if he is the de facto second linebacker, you're also going to see whoever is linebacker 3 coming on the field a lot just to keep Bynes fresh because another year older. One of the things that we saw about why the defense had such a tough time in the second half of games last year was just you had lots of older players being asked to play very high snap counts because of all the injuries, whether you're talking about Campbell, whether you're talking about Houston, whether you're talking about Bynes. They wear down. They're not meant to play every single snap at their age. So beyond that, you also have maybe Chuck Clark or Kyle Hamilton stepping into kind of a hybrid linebacker role with the 3 safeties if they're both still going to be on the roster. Maybe Deion Jones as a trade candidate if Atlanta is willing to keep some of the cap. We know that Baltimore has a trade relationship with Atlanta after the Hayden Hurst trade. Is that something that they're looking into? Because reports came out this past week that he is not a lock to make that roster in Atlanta.
Probably a trade relationship after robbing them, but
but hey, if it's a player that is already not a lock to make their roster, though, it'd be something to see after not ever drafting an LSU player, suddenly having your entire linebacking core being LSU players with Jones and Patrick Queen. I don't know how Ozzie Newsome would feel about that, but that's another option. I think Quan Alexander's still out there. Anthony Barr is more of a Sam linebacker, but someone who's been mentioned as someone we could bring in, especially if they're not feeling great about Tyus Bowser being ready to handle a full snap count. And then John Harbaugh's also said that with Bowser's injury, Malik Harrison's going to be seeing more of a Bowser-Sam kind of role. So is he going to be a pure middle linebacker, inside linebacker type, or is he going to be more of a hybrid? That's also a wild card in there. So, but as things stand, you have to think it'll be, Bynes and then maybe one of these undrafted guys as a 2A. Or maybe they bring in LJ Fort back. He's still out there on the market as well. So
true.
Really, it's interesting because it's not a position you feel incredibly worried about, especially because of Clark and Hamilton being able to drop into the box. But it's also one you can't really look at on paper and feel very good about saying it's going to look like this, especially because we know McDonald wants to throw a lot of different looks. And so you have to imagine a lot of unconventional players will be taking snaps at the linebacker position that are not intended to be true linebackers. And maybe the Ravens see that as a Moneyball approach where they are not, especially because you have to think they'll add another edge at some point, whether that's Jason Pierre-Paul or someone else. It's a way to save cap by not adding someone else while still adding a lot of value in that position group through unconventional methods.
Yeah, that was you took the words out of my mouth. Who knows? We could just see a lot of dime looks this year. A lot of 6 defensive backs on the field with that 6 defensive back sort of playing that rover middle of the field, and it just removes the need for a middle linebacker 2 altogether. So who knows? Like you said, there's a lot of different ways that this thing could go before September. What is it, 11th? Yeah.
I think that was really well said, Mike, and especially shout out to Moneyball, favorite book of all time. There are also, that 1A, that 2A, 2B approach also makes me think about kind of the committee approach that the Ravens are taking to a couple positions. Wide receiver 2, while I think Proche is going to emerge as kind of the guy because he's got that dog in him by the end of the year, I do think snap count rotation. I saw that, Mike. I do think snap count rotation is going to be it is going to be a committee. You're going to see Duve and Wallace and Proche, and maybe even if a 5th guy makes the roster or they sign, you're going to see them rotate a lot out there. You're going to see them rotate in and out of the slot. I just think that they're going to try and have a very variable offense. On that side, you're going to see Isaiah Likely split out to the slot too. So that's fine. And then I think running back is the other committee. You mentioned Beatty's going to get a lot of early snaps. I think Mike Davis is too. And I think that as a result, when Dobbins and Edwards come back, whenever they do, whether it's week 1 or later, but I don't think it's even going to be like, oh my God, we got Gus and Dobbins back. It's just like, dang, like who are we going to hand the ball off to now? Because I think Davis is built for this offense. And like I said, Mike, you have been really excited about Beatty.
Yeah, it's funny because last year it was, who are we going to hand the ball off to? And this year it's like, who are we going to hand the ball off to? You know what I mean? It's like a totally different mindset going into it. It's great.
And that's kind of the way this front office works. I mean, I think every team likes to be like, oh, we have the best front office. I do think ours is one that is constantly learning from itself and progressing, advancing. It's not stagnant. And I think that's huge. Talking about the cornerbacks, the committee, we're going to see a cornerback committee. I think just past Marlon and Peters, I think we'll see a committee. I think Fuller will probably get a majority of those cornerback 3 snaps.
Did we lose Nikhil?
I think we momentarily lost Nikhil.
Oh, what a face that was!
Oh, he's back though. He's back.
Oh, did I freeze?
You froze up, but it's all
good. I can't wait to go to the stream after this and take a screenshot of it for you to Photoshop my face on again. Did you catch the audio or did you lose everything?
Nah, we lost you. Yeah.
Okay, so I was talking about the committee. I was talking about the cornerbacks. Yeah. So I think Fuller's going to get a lot of those CB3 snaps. But I still think they're going to go with committee. I still think that Brandon Stephens is going to get a lot of looks. You're going to have Clark and Hamilton drop down in the slot plenty as well. I think more than playing cornerback, we're just going to have defensive backs on the field. They're going to be playing defensive back instead of strictly cornerback because they're going to be moving around a lot. Like you said, that variable defense on the linebacker side is going to apply to the defensive backs too. And I think it's just going to be really cool to watch. I'm just really excited for the defense this year. First time, like I said on the last pod, first time since Lamar Jackson was drafted that I'm more excited to see the defense than the offense. So speaking of defenses over offenses, we can move into our – I know, that was good. We can move into our defensive 7-on-7 draft. And if you remember from last time, I don't remember the rosters off the top of my head, but we will post them on Twitter after this, along with the vote for today's draft. But we're drafting a 7-on-7 team. We're going to go with 2 defensive linemen, 1 inside linebacker, 1 outside linebacker, and 3 defensive backs. We're going to do it snake style and in reverse of the order we did last time, which means we're going to start with Ron, then Michael, then me, and then I will start the second round coming back. And we've got to fill those 7 positions, and then we'll throw a poll up on Twitter, and whoever gets the most votes gets bragging rights in our group chat. So that's all important.
Yeah, Nikhil, you definitely kind of won the draft in the first 5 seconds last time. Once you took Lamar in that 7-on-7 for the offense,
we should have banned him, honestly.
We should have. That's all right. We live and learn. We're a growing
in a way, little test run, and really, this is the real one. This is the real one, guys.
Absolutely. All right, so first pick. Another one that seems kind of obvious. I'm taking Ray Lewis. We have 1 middle linebacker slot. You may as well take the best one, not only that there was in team history, but probably that there was in NFL history. A lot of the other positions, there's a lot of depth there, and there's been some great middle linebackers that have come through Baltimore besides Ray, but it's Ray Lewis, the Ravens. It's who you think of when you think of the team. It's the number 1 overall pick. Ray's mine.
Yeah, and sort of in that similar vein, maybe not quite at that level, but the second pick has to be Ed Reed. Let's just get these out of the way real quick. Yeah. Hopefully rounds 2 through 7 will be a lot more exciting than this. But while, the Ravens have a really great history of good defensive backs, so even without him, you feel pretty solid. You have to have Ed Reed. It's backyard football. He's so quick. He's so smart. He's the kind of guy that you trust to be on his own in sort of a thinner roster situation. And so, yeah, it takes care of itself. Give me Ed Reed.
It was back and forth between those two for me. I really struggled. The only reason I picked Ray was just because by a hair, he's more synonymous.
Yeah. Oh, I might be still muted. No, I'm not. And so that's the tough part about picking third, because there's a very, very clear 1 and 2. And after that, it gets a little bit fuzzy. I think the first pick I'm definitely going to go with. Actually, I don't think it gets too fuzzy now that I think about it. I've got 2 very, very, two very picks I'm very, very comfortable with. First
Yeah.
one, defensive back, Rod Woodson, baby.
Wow. Not what I was thinking.
There goes
Love
my
it.
sleeper. I thought you guys would
I
forget
knew
about
I
him.
knew one of you old heads was gonna have it as a sleeper, and so I had to take it.
Damn, look at you.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, dude's an all-time great.
Well done.
And did some of his best work in Baltimore, which is an important caveat of this draft. It's about their time in Baltimore. So as much as I wanted to pick Deion Sanders, partially because I found an absolutely sick Deion Sanders Ravens jersey at Goodwill the other day, yeah, I can't, because as good as he was with other teams, he wasn't really that good in Baltimore. He was like fine.
No.
So obvious, one pretty good pick there. And, I'm going back and forth on this one.
Really?
For outside linebacker. And as much as like my heart and me growing up watching him in the gladiator mask is telling me Suggs, I gotta go with Peter Boulware. The dude is just
wow.
The dude is just he's the legend. He's so criminally underrated because of who he played with. But yeah, give me Peter Boulware. It's so tough. It's splitting hairs between him and Suggs. Suggs should probably be the next pick here.
Yeah, I think you just handed Michael the draft.
Yeah, well, it is tough for Reed, but it is those two eras, right? The Woodson Boulware era and the Reed Suggs era. And I figured since I picked Woodson, I might as well go ahead and take Boulware and let Mike pair up his stars too.
Yeah, you're definitely targeting a demographic.
It's not fun now to take Suggs, but you have to do it when he falls to you. So I'm sorry that this has been such a boring first two rounds for people listening and heavily invested in Team Natelli over here. But you got to do it. He is just the best pass rusher in Ravens history, certainly at least in terms of guys who've been long-term Ravens. And you can probably still make the case he's the best pass rusher Ravens history to ever suit up in the purple and black. So give me Suggs if I'm only having one pass rushing outside linebacker. Ron, who you got?
Well, now that you guys have kind of cornered that outside linebacker market, I could just wait on that one. So I'm going to go with a position that none of us have drafted yet. I'm going to take a defensive lineman. I'm taking Haloti. Big Haloti Nada in there. Come on. What more needs to be said? The big man from Oregon. Good luck moving him. And to actually, do I want to just lock down this position right now, or do I want to?
It's funny you say that because I'm very curious to see who you go with.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna wait on that one. Because I'm gonna see how you guys shake this out. Because there's a group there after Haloti that I feel is a lot of guys that are very close to each other. So I'm gonna go Chris McAllister here. Give me. Up until another guy, and we won't say other players who could potentially be drafted in this, but up until a certain player who is here now, he was the best cornerback in Ravens history. For our generation, me and Michaels, as Nikhil called us, the old heads, he was like our kind of guy. Screw you, by the way. As my 30th birthday approaches next month, it's not very
22 on Sunday. Let's go.
Oh, snap. All right, we'll talk about that after. Yeah, I'll go Chris McAllister here. Give me the man.
Good pick.
All right, so back to me, right?
Yep.
So I'm actually going to jump in on the inside linebacker or inside interior defensive lineman market and take Calais Campbell. And while you can make cases for other interior linemen in Ravens history as far as just pure talent, his collective height and speed for someone his size, I think plays really well when you're thinking about 7-on-7 football. For someone his size, he gets after the quarterback as fast as anyone. He is still just as strong, I think, as just about anybody. There are other guys who are maybe beefier and can stop the run in a more traditional kind of 11-on-11 football and AFC North football. But if I'm trying to stop Lamar Jackson from the keel, if I'm trying to, play 7-on-7 here, I think Calais Campbell's combination of being able to get after the quarterback and knock down passes with just long arms is probably going to be as great an asset as I can have along the interior defensive line. And I don't think anyone else matches it when you look at other players at that position spot.
So it's funny because last draft, I probably went with a lot more popular picks, which definitely helped me. I mean, Jackson did too, but I definitely went with a lot more popular picks. And I think I took, your guys' commentary from that a little too much to heart. because now I'm still going, but I'm selling out again because my first two picks were not the stock picks, right? But I've decided to just sell out. I'm just going to completely commit to this little bit here. I'm bringing it back. Sam Adams, Tony Siragusa, come on down, D-line,
nice.
run through that. I dare you. There's not a team on earth that can run through that D-line, and the idea of having Goose and Sam Adams back together in front of Rod Woodson and Peter Boulware.
You're just rebuilding the Super Bowl defense, which I mean, it's not bad.
Best defense of all time, baby.
Yeah,
Like it's all about. So I know that was a little quicker. I mean, but I mean, talk about a combo, and I want to be clear here. Definitely winning the vibes battle. I think with those two wins the vibes battle because those guys untouched. Mike, back to you.
All right, let's see. I can wait on inside linebacker, so I guess I'll go Humphrey. Marlon Humphrey to take my second defensive back. I'd love to see more of what it could have been like with him and Ed Reed on the field at the same time, but now we get to. So we're looking at Campbell, Suggs, Reed, and Humphrey so far, and you got to feel pretty good about that. So, make sure to get the guy who can punch the football out. Maybe have Ed Reed scoop it up and take it for a house call. It's really fun to think about. And between those two and Suggs, you should feel really good about your turnover ability. So, Ron, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm going to round out my secondary here. I'm going to take my last two. I'm going to go Eric Weddle and Marcus Peters. Give me the second best safety. The second best safety in Ravens history. Probably one of the best, debatably the best free agent signing the team ever had. If we're talking vibes battle, what's more vibe than a guy who ends every game with a big old bowl of ice cream? That's the kind of vibe that I want to be in. So give me the beard. And I had to take Marcus Peters. He's my favorite current Raven. Every time the guy opens his mouth, he creeps up my board for being favorite of the favorite all-time Ravens. He personifies what it means to be a Raven. So for that reason alone, give me Juice Man.
All right, I guess it's back to me, and I'm trying to finish off my defensive backfield here. So with my third defensive back, I'll go with Jimmy Smith.
Nice.
He's a physical guy. He'll be able to, you want to buy those those two interior linemen and maybe your outside linebacker some time to rush that quarterback a little bit. Smith's going to be really physical on the line of scrimmage, make sure that a guy's not getting away from him too much. Reed, Humphrey, and Smith is a pretty good 1, 2, 3 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good start. And I mean, you guys have all of your defensive backs now, right?
Yes.
That's
yes.
right.
So I can wait on. I'll take one.
Really good names still on the board too. If you're going for that old school approach, there's one I'm looking at right now that I almost took. But
yeah, I got a couple. So wait, who are your defensive backs again? I'm going to make sure.
Chris McAllister, Marcus Peters, and Eric Weddle.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I figured. So I mean, I'll go inside linebacker first. This is a tough one, but this is a good example of guys playing their best on the Ravens. I'm going to go Zach Orr here. I mean, Zach Orr was on his way to being one of the
good pick.
Like, I would say Zach Orr was probably on his way to being a top 15 linebacker in the NFL before his health issues. He was freaking phenomenal. He's a phenomenal coach. And I'm clearly a sucker for the sentimental side today. So I'll take that. Defensive back, my second defensive back, this is a little tough one. I have a lot of ideas for my last one, but I think I'm just going to go straight corner with this one. One of the most decorated corners in team history, that's Dwayne Starks, Super Bowl winner. Can't ask for more. Met him in Denver last year when I was at the Denver Broncos Ravens game. Absolute, just great guy to be around and, answered a couple questions. And, I like having him in front of Rod Woodson and bringing the game back together.
I love it. Well, I'm just going to finish off my interior group here and get Trevor Pryce is still out there, right?
Yeah, he is.
He is. So, with my sixth pick, I'll go Pryce to pair with Calais Campbell. And, well, it may not pass the vibes check of Sam and Goose. It's still a pretty fun 1-2 punch. So,
it passes the mountain check. I'll tell you that.
It certainly does. And unless you're annoyed by it, Campbell's still going to yell out "Let's go" every time. So it's still got its own little brand there.
I'll spare everybody the Calais Campbell impression again.
Does Calais Campbell sound like Doc Rivers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Enough
Very
that I
much
know what
a
you're
lot.
talking about. Yeah.
I feel like they have that rasp. Anyway,
Between the two of them, it's like sandpaper having a conversation. Anyway, all right. So we got my last two picks here. I need a defensive lineman and an outside linebacker. So for the other outside linebacker, we'll go Doomerville. Give me the sacks. He had the one really great season in Baltimore, but besides from that, it wasn't totally stellar. But you can't take that one. 2015, correct?
Mm-hmm.
2015 was a great year. So give me Doom, and I'll round things out with a guy who I think is kind of criminally underrated in Ravens defensive line lore, and that's Kelly Gregg. It's kind of a deep cut. Yeah, I didn't even.
Good one.
All right, good. Yeah, I was wondering. I wasn't sure how you guys were going to react to that one, but Kelly Gregg, he was a guy, another one that I loved watching as I was growing up, being a defensive tackle myself. Like, I just loved watching him, and he was really, the Ravens have a really long history. When you look at all the guys, and even some of the guys that aren't going to get drafted in this, there's so many just underrated guys who, if they were on any other franchise, they'd be cornerstones that they still talk about today. But just because there's such a long lineage of history in Baltimore and so many great players have come there, it's like Alabama players, you know what I mean? Especially in that early 2000s, late 90s stretch. There's just so many great players who get lost in the fold, and Kelly Gregg is one of them. So I'm going to round my draft out with him.
I like it.
My last pick, inside linebacker, kind of just fell in my lap. Give me CJ Mosley, 4-time second. His name has kind of fallen off since he's been in New York, but with the Ravens, 4 Pro Bowls, 4 AP second team All Pros in 5 years. Can't argue with it. He's no Ray Lewis, but when we're talking about 7-on-7, just super mobile, guy you can trust to maybe cover a tight end or something like that, maybe spy a quarterback. So feel pretty good with CJ Mosley falling into my lap in round 7.
Yeah, it was him and Bart Scott, because again, Bart Scott had those good years in Baltimore, but has fell off since and has fallen off even more since. My final one, this is a shot, and this is a direct shot at Eric Weddle. I love you, Eric Weddle. In a couple of years, you will be the 3rd best safety in Ravens team history, because the 2nd best will be Kyle freaking Hamilton, my last pick.
I was going back and forth on that because I wasn't sure if we'd be able to take guys that haven't played yet, but I'll give him to you.
I mean, I feel like him having not played yet is like the big risk of the pick, right? Like, he is still a rookie who has never played before, never played in the NFL before.
Hype versus
and production. So that's why I was like, I did not want to do it earlier, but I do think that young man definitely has the potential to be the 2nd best safety in this team's history, and that is a tall task, because Eric Weddle was phenomenal, like you said, but I think the potential for him to be a long-term piece of this defense in a way that Weddle, I wish we signed Weddle like 5 years before we actually signed him, because he would have he would be a Hall of Famer, I think. Yeah, I think he's already close, but I think he'd be a surefire Hall of Famer if he was here longer. But I think Kyle Hamilton will end up being the 2nd best safety in this team's history. You're never going to knock off the greatest safety to ever play the game in Ed Reed. Anyone who thinks Polamalu or whoever the hell else is better is, I don't know, a Pittsburgh fan probably.
They got bigger things to worry about. They lost their ketchup bottle.
Amen. Oh my God. And I think just Hamilton has got that. And I also think we haven't talked about it too much because we haven't been really following that side of this draft. But in terms of 7-on-7, Kyle Hamilton is that guy. I think Kyle Hamilton would be my first, if I was looking at the Ravens roster right now, and I wanted like a 7-on-7 playing both sides of the ball, maybe Lamar's your first pick, but I think Hamilton's got a good case for it. Just football playing ability. So to recap my draft real quick, I went for the nostalgia play early on, going with Rod Woodson and Peter Boulware with my first 2 picks. Doubled down on that with Sam Adams and Tony Siragusa as my second 2 picks. Then I took Zach Orr as my inside linebacker, as well as Dwayne Starks, Super Bowl winner. So really got most of that defense reassembled, other than arguably the key player, Ray Lewis. And for last pick, like I said, went with Kyle Hamilton, Ravens 1st round rookie, and hoping that he blossoms into everything we hope he could be.
Yep. And I went Ray Lewis first, of course, to kind of steal him from you, to prevent you from completing that puzzle. Chris McAllister, Haloti Nada, Eric Weddle, Marcus Peters, Elvis Dumerville, and Kelly Gregg.
I went with Calais Campbell, Trevor Price, and Terrell Suggs in the front three, CJ Mosley at inside linebacker, and then a defensive backfield of Ed Reed, Marlon Humphrey, and Jimmy Smith.
You know, there's like some kind of like patterns. You know, obviously I went like very like throwback Super Bowl team. Mike went with, I feel like, a lot of like popular picks from like mid 2000s to like now ish. Like just a lot of really good players who made their names, like have really strong name recognition, like really made their names. And Ron quietly assembled like the most underrated defense, like players that are all like, other than Lewis, players that are all crazy underrated. Most of them never played together, and I can't stop imagining what a defense would look like with year 7 together. Is really intriguing to me because a lot of our players overlapped. Me and Mike's players overlapped on Baltimore at some point, and very few of yours did. And so I think that's just a really interesting spin. I've really liked doing this again with you guys because we all have like a little bit of a different approach, so it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, with those 7 guys, you could throw us 3 and Chris Schisler out there, and our defense would be good. So,
okay, all right, but what positions would
love
we
you,
be
Chris?
playing? What positions would we be playing? Do you think? Like,
so I would definitely be on the defensive line. That seems obvious. Michael would be a slot corner,
left bench.
Nikhil. I don't know. Maybe a free roving middle linebacker, something like that.
Maybe a little,
maybe
a little Chuck Clark, doesn't have the athleticism, but the anticipation.
You'd be a green dot guy. I'll tell you that's for sure.
I like that. I got the glasses for it.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. Well, it was excellent as always chopping it up with you. Training camps started. Ron, I know you and I got some dates that we're going to be at camp and coming to you live from camp. We're going to do a live podcast from my house, I think, which is going to be a lot of fun because I don't live too far from the training facility. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been saying this for like 2 or 3 podcasts now, but like we're actually right there now. Like there are actually, football players at the Ravens facility in Baltimore playing football, and that's really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, once we hit, it's Tuesday, they report, right? Next Tuesday?
Yep.
So, I mean, whenever we record, I'm guessing it'll be a little later in the week like this, probably Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have legitimate things and legitimate stories to talk about from now until January. So, like I said in the beginning, full steam ahead, and I'm pumped.
Yeah, and as a final note, let's go Orioles. If any Orioles fans in Baltimore listening, pack the yard this weekend against the Yankees. Just
that I can agree with.
Take down the Yankees really hard this weekend. It's going to be a blast. So thank you guys for joining us so much again. Mike, as always, a pleasure to have you. And everyone, thank you for tuning in.